Okay, so we're back, and for episode 5, we're going to add some final touches to our draw function. I need to fix a conflict we have between the background and the colors. I'll show you. That takes 2 seconds. And then we'd like to add some buttons to the canvas to allow us to clear the screen. I want a button so I can undo what I just drew in case I don't like it. I want to change the parameters. And basically, I need buttons that allow me to enter the how-to parameters. Right now, we have to restart the program every time, and all the shapes are drawn the same. Then once we're finished with that, we're going to add a little complexity. I'm going to add a grow loop. So once we draw the shapes, we can actually increase their size. And we'll also add the buttons so we can change the start angle, the line width, and pick where we actually start picking the color as we're drawing. And then we'll conclude. So let's get started. Here's where we left off before, and I've changed the how to draw function to do the 8-sided figure repeated 8 times. And so when I click, I didn't get anything the first click. Click, didn't get anything. Click, 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 click. Didn't get anything. Oh, wait a minute. We're drawing on a black background on our canvas, and we're drawing with a black color. So the first thing we need to do is to make that white. Now, when I do that and I restart, now when I every time I click, I'll get a shape because then now I can get shapes that show up because the black doesn't disappear. So that's the first thing we need to do. Now, the second thing we want to do is that to the canvas, we want to add a frame. We're going to put it at the top, so I'm going to call it top frame. And that's going to equal a frame, which basically is part of the TK stuff. We're going to add it to the canvas, and we're going to set its background like we're doing to gray, just so it's not too bright. We're set the background to gray, and then I have to pack it into the window. So top frame, pack, and I want to put this at the side equals top. We want it centered at the top. Okay, so now there's a frame. We put that at the top of the program so we can refer to it in everything we want to. And now I'm going to go down to the bottom in the main. All this is our function at the top. This is our main part of the program. And down here, I am going to put some things in the frame. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a clear button. Okay, and that is going to be equal to a button that we want to put in the top frame, place it in the top frame. We want it to have text on the button. What's the text going to say? The text is going to say clear. And it's just, we're not going to say clear screen. We'll just say clear. And when I push the button, I want it to run a command called clear screen. All right. And I'm also going to set the background to gray, and I'm going to pack it in. Let me pack it in here. So to keep this on one line, I'm just going to repeat this clear button dot pack. And we're going to put it in on the side left because we're going to stack some things along this button, and that should be an equal sign. Okay, so that should put a clear button in. Now, I've got a function clear screen, which I haven't written yet. So I need to find a function called clear screen. And let's move it down a little bit. Clear screen, and it has to have no arguments in this case, and we want to clear the screen. Well, how do you clear the screen? Well, in the canvas, it has the ability to delete, and it uses a special string. If you put delete all, that should delete everything on the canvas. So now I've added a button to this frame. The frame's going to be at the top, and when I push the button, it should call clear screen, which should just delete everything on the canvas. Let's see if that works. So now I fire up my program. I've got a button here. Look at that. It says clear. So if I click and I draw all these shapes, now what's going to happen when I push clear? Oh, look at that. They all disappear. That's quite nice. So we've added a clear function. That's nice. Now we want to continue adding buttons so we can set the parameters that are being show me how to draw. So I also want to be able to not clear the whole screen, but what if I want to undo the last drawing? So let's add an undo button. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take this guy, we're going to duplicate it, and we're going to say this is undo. Undo button. And it's going to say undo undo, how you want to spell that is your choice. I'm going to spell it that way. And then we need to do an undo call. Undo. All right, so now I need, and then that's fine. It's going to be packed in there. And now I need an undo function. Define undo as a function. And I'm just going to right now just say print undo. Okay, so let's see how that works. We'll fire that up. We got, ooh, one thing I forgot to do. One thing I forgot to do is I packed the clear button. This is not clear button. This is undo button. I got to pack it in. I put it at the end of the line just so it's only one line per button. Anyway, so now I'm going to add it to the screen. So let's add it to the screen. There it is. And when I push the undo button, it prints undo. So now we have to figure out how to undo what we drew. So here's the thing. In our drawing program, we're drawing lots and lots of lines. Lots and lots of lines. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a global myUndo function. And up at the top of the program, I am going to define myUndo. And it's going to be an array. All right. And it's going to be empty. Okay. And then I'm going to have this myUndo function passed into my draw program. Okay, so I'm going to add this myUndo program. I added this earlier, my mistake, so that's supposed to be there. So now I can refer to this myUndo variable. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a list called what did I do? So let's call it did. It's going to be a list of what I did, or lines. Let's just call it lines drawn. Lines drawn is going to be a list. And what I'm going to do, every time I draw a line, I'm going to say lines drawn, append my line. So I'm going to, I didn't spell that right. Did I spell it wrong up here? I did. I spelled it wrong up here. Lines drawn, and here is lines drawn. So I create an empty list before I draw anything, and then I push each line onto that list. And so when I'm done drawing at the end of the program, when I'm finished, I know exactly what I drew. They're all in an array called lines drawn. So I have myUndo is a list. So I'm going to append to that list lines drawn. So I'm going to append a list to a list. So what we're going to do here is when we come down to undo is we're not going to print myUndo. We're going to print myUndo and see what it looks like. So let's go ahead and kill this. Let's restart that. So I drew a function. Let's see what undo looks like. Look at that. Undo is drawing these. The way the canvas works is it just gives a number to every shape. So there is a list here from 1 to 64 that are the shapes I just drew. This is a loop of 8 times 8. Now, if I do it again and I push the undo button, now I have two lists. I have a list that goes 1 to 64, and then I have another list that goes from 65 all the way up to 128. So to undo what I last drew, all I need to do in here is I need to have my global, because I want to modify it, undo. Sorry, my global myUndo. And for all shapes in, and now I'm going to myUndo, we need to check if the length of myUndo, I need it missing a parentheses, sorry. If the length of myUndo is greater than 0, then I'm going to do something. Otherwise, there's nothing to undo, and I should do nothing. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this print statement. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say for each integer in myUndo.pop. Now what pop does is it takes a list and it pops the last element off the list. We'll go ahead and do some testing here and I'll show you how that works. But let me finish this up. So I'm going to pop the last thing I drew, and for each object in there, canvas dot delete the object, which is going to be I. So we created a list at the top called my undo, and it's going to keep track of everything we drew, every object that we drew on the canvas. When we're drawing on the canvas, I'm going to keep track of the lines that I drew in another array. And so I'm going to push on the lines I drew, lines drawn, I'm going to push the line, the actual line, which is what's returned by the canvas that tells me the object itself on the canvas. And then I'm going to push that set of lines onto an array so that I can undo them one at a time. So first thing let's do is let's look at this pop function. So I'm going to go to the Python console and we're going to make a list. So I'm going to say my list, my L is equal to, it's going to be a list. And in this case, it's going to be a list of lists. I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4 in the first list. And the second list is going to be 5, 4, 3, 2. And I'll put a third one as well. That's only going to be 0 and 10. I didn't put the 0 in. It's very upset with me. Okay, let's print my list. Whoops. Syntax error. My list. So it's two lists. So now if I pop my list dot pop, okay, that's a function. And it returned the last element on my list, which is 0 and 10. But now if I print my list, pop returns the last element, but it also removes it. So it's no longer in the list. And so now if I do a pop again, I get 5, 4, 3, 2. And if I print my list, it's only got the first element in it. And if I pop that, I get the first numbers 1, 2, and 3, and 4. And now my list is empty. It's got nothing in it. So that's how we're going to reverse the order of what we drew. So let's go ahead and give this a try. I'm going to close this. We're going to fire this up. I get my buttons. I got a clear button and an undo button. Let me go ahead and draw some buttons. There we go. We're going to draw some shapes. I'll put these all over here, and then I'll put one shape back over here and over here and over here. And now I'm going to hit undo. It disappeared. The last one I drew disappeared. The last one I drew is over here on the left. It's removing them in order that I drew them until there's none left and I don't get any errors. Pretty slick. So I can draw a bunch of boxes, and if I want to clear them all, I can clear them all. But if I click and don't like that one, I can undo it and click it again and undo it and click it again. That was pretty easy to do by just keeping track with a global variable called myUndo of all the lines that we've drawn on the program. Now let's move on and start adding additional buttons where I can change what I'm drawing, the how-to feature, right? The how-to list of distance and loop 1 and loop 2. So let's go ahead and add those. So here we've added some buttons and we pack them in to the canvas. To add an entry object, it takes a little bit of work. And so rather than repeating lines and lines and lines for all the entry buttons that we want to add, I'm going to create a function to make an entry button. And I'm going to call it define my entry. I'm using kind of Camelback. I want to know where do I want to put where on the canvas do I want to put it? What's the text that I should set on my entry button? And what is the default value? Because I need to set a default value for the program to know what the default value should be of an entry box. So to define this layout, the first thing I'm doing is I'm going to create a label. Just going to call it L for now. And it's a label. And I want to put it in wherever where is. And it has an attribute of text. And I want to set that to my text variable being passed into my function, right? So this is a different function. Each function can have a different text value. And I want to pass in the text value. And then I'm going to do this because I've been doing it everywhere else. Just set the background to gray. You can change that if you don't like gray, but that's fine. And then I'm going to take that function, that label, and I'm going to pack it. And I'm going to pack it into side equals left because we're going to stack all these things along the left, starting in the left-hand side and moving to the right. So I'm going to pack that in the left. Now I need to add my actual entry box. and where I can actually type. And so it's called an entry. And it gets to be told where to put the entry button, which canvas it's in, or which frame in this case. We're going to justify, and I want it centered. It's easier to type if it stays in the center. I want to also set the background to gray because I'm doing that on everything. And I also can define the width of this entry box. And I don't want it to be too long, so I'm just going to say width is equal to 6. Okay? Now, I have an entry box. I have to pack it or it won't show up. Pack side equals left. And then I want to set the default value. So it's called the entry box e.insert. And into the entry box, I want to insert, I have to pick where I want to insert. Well, I want to insert at position 0. So, and then the thing I want to insert is the default value. So I have a function that it's what, 5 lines that I tell it where I want to put it, what the text should be, and the default value, and it will return, this is the key, it will return my entry button, E. So I want to return the entry button E. So with this function, if I wanted to add an entry button, let's say I want to add an entry button down here for the distance. Okay. Let's do distance. And I'm going to put str in the end because I have to be reminded that this entry box is going to be text. You're going to be typing it. And so it's going to be text. And so we're going to need to convert it when we want to use it. So my entry, and I want to put it in the top frame. That's where I want to place the entry button. In this case, I want to put in the word distance. I want you to enter the distance we want to move. And I want the default value, let's say 30 for the default value. And it's actually a string. So it needs to be put in as a string. I said 30, put in 20. So that should give me an entry button. Well, let's see if that worked. So we created a function that I can call that will create a label with the name of the button, and then it will have an entry area where I can type that's 6 characters wide, and it will return me the button, and I set that return value to this distance string. So let's try it. So if I kill this guy and restart, look at that. It says clear, undo, and distance with a value of 30. Well, if I click and I change this to 60, nothing's going to happen because I'm not looking at that. But now we can go look at it. So where we grab the distance, instead of grabbing it from how to up here at the top, in our drawing function, we get how to draw. But let's overwrite the value of D, and it wants to be the float. I want to convert what you type into a floating value. I'll explain why. And what it was dist string, and I want to get its value. So I can still leave it in how to draw for now. We'll clean it up later. So dist is the floating value of whatever you typed. So now, when I run this program, and I have 30 in here, and I click, I get a 30 space. And if I click 10, I get 10. And if I click 35.5, I get 35.5. It actually will take, for example, I can do 0.5. It'll be awfully damn small. It's a tiny little dot, right? But I can use that floating value. We'll need that when we draw circles and stuff. So now I can change the distance. I can make it 80, and I get it 80. Oh, I don't like that one. I can undo it. I can change this to 50, and it draws 50. So we can start changing all the values of what we're drawing by adding additional buttons. So let's go back and do that. So in addition to the distance, so I'm going to do this wonderful Control D command, which copies the line. And I'm going to say inner inside loop. And I'm going to remind myself that it's a string. And I'm going to basically, this guy is going to be called, it's the number. It's going to be inner, and I'm going to put a pound sign on it to make number sign. So inner number. So what is the inner number going to start out to be? It's going to also be a string, but we'll start out with 8. So we'll make an octagon. And that's for the inside loop. And then I've got an out loop, Control D this, and then change this to out. Would have been quicker, a lot quicker. Get rid of this. And we're going to change this to outer. Okay. And let's then use in loop string and out loop string in the drawing program. So I'm just going to copy one of these guys. Well, it'll remind me, in loop string. So in here, this is inner count, right? But well, let's just do it here. Inner count is equal to in loop string, and I have to get its value dot get. So that gives me the value. But in this case, I want to convert it into an integer because it's going to come back as a string. When I type text, it's always a string. And so I want the inner count to be the integer value of what's in the count. And then I want outer, the next loop down is outer count. Outer count wants to equal the integer. And in this case, it's out loop string. And I also have to get its value. So let's see if I've just added the ability for my program to change what I'm drawing. So this says 38 and 8. Look at that. Now if I change it to 4, look at that. It's only 4. And I can say the outer loop is only 2. Right? And so I get a box. I can make this 3. I can make this 100. And I get 2 triangles. Because remember, we're starting off drawing to the right. We turn then and to come back to where we started, and then we turn and do the next triangle. But what if I wanted to turn this just a little bit? Why don't we add the ability to change the starting angle? So if I go down here to the bottom and I just change the distance command, duplicate it, and I'm going to say angle string. Angle string, and this is going to be angle. Start angle. And then I want to use the angle string up here at the top. This is going to be instead the integer of angle string. I have to get its value because it's an actual button. So now I believe I can change the start angle. Oh, I default the start angle to 30. Let's default this. Just change it to 45 for a moment. And I'm going to change this to 4. Let me change this to 2. So start angle 45, distance 4, inner number 4. It drew a box and it only went once. So that's fine. I'll do twice. So that's okay. I can change the start angle to 0, and it goes to the right and does what I expected. And when I change the start angle to 45 or minus 45, right, then it rotated it vertically, right? So I can change the starting angle. So that's nice. I'd like to add a little bit more complexity. We've got the ability to change the angle. I'm going to change the default value of the angle just for giggles. We're going to make the default value of the angle 0 because that's what we've been using all along. But since it's so easy to add these extra counters, what if I were to add, and again, my undo button can undo everything. That's nice. Let's go and add another loop. So I'm going to add a increment loop. All right. So the way I'm going to do this, and by the way, how to draw, you can see here turn gray. This is no longer being used. So I'm going to comment that statement out with a control/. And I want to add additional loop. So I'm going to say for increment, let me call this increment loop. And I'm going to change this just to the letter K. It doesn't really matter. It's just going to repeat. Okay? And then I want to take all of our stuff that's here and shift it over 1. And at the bottom here, I want D plus equals dist increment. So I'm going to add a dist increment value. This my undo needs to be shifted back so it's the last thing that happens to pin all the lines. So we added an extra loop after we draw in a box and then we repeat the box at different angles. Now I'm going to have an increment loop where I can actually change the size of the box. You don't have to use it, but you can. So now I need to define dist increment and I need to define increment loop. So I'm going to duplicate this line and say increment loop. Let's use the same syntax I used before. Increment count is increment loop string, and this becomes increment count, just to be consistent. So I've got increment count, that's the integer value of increment loop string, and I also want to get the increment. Dist increment is going to be equal to, what did I call it at the bottom? Dist INCR, that's what I called it. Copy. Dist INCR is going to be equal to the floating value, we use floats for the distances that we move, of increment by string. So now I need to define these two values that I want to increment, the inside loop, the increment loop, how many times I increment, and what I want to increment by. So we need these two variables, increment loop and increment by strings, down at the bottom, where we can put in an entry button in. So I will duplicate increment loop string. That's what I believe I'm using up at the top. And this is increment number. That's what I call it. Increment loop string, increment loop string, and increment by string. And so I'm going to take this guy and duplicate him and make this increment by. I want the distance first. Increment by string, and this is increment by, and this is increment number in the increment loop string, and now I have both strings defined. So if I'm not mistaken, and I kill this guy, and I run this guy, I've got a start angle, a distance, an inner loop, an outer loop, how much I want to increment by, and the increment number. Now, for giggles, let's just set these to 1 because they won't do anything. So this should give me the shape that I had before. Okay? Let's make this a little bit, let's do 8, but let's not do 8. Let's just do 2 of these guys. So I'm going to go 30, 30, right? And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to increment the 30 by 5 times. So you see how that works? I drew the shapes and then incremented 5 times. So now if this is actually set to 8, and I clear everything, instead of this, where I get 1, now I get 5 different sizes, which is pretty cool, right? So if I go back to increment number 5 times, that's pretty nice looking. But we're not done yet. We got a couple more things we want to do. But before I make this video too long, I think I'm going to stop there and conclude for this one. We'll continue in the next episode.